A small mining colony has now grown into a hot trading hub where criminal syndicates are trying to gain control in Shadow Moon Syndicates.
And today we'll be teaching you how to play Shadow Moon Syndicates, game designed by J. Carmichael and published by Arcus Games.
And hello everyone, it's Stella.
And Tarrant from Meeple University.
And hey, if you enjoyed the video, you really help us by liking it, let us know what you think, and subscribe. Like, seriously, that would help us bringing more videos. Okay, now let's get to the classroom.
In Shadow Moon Syndicates, players are crime syndicate bosses fighting over control of the Shadow Moon. In a battle of tactical area control, players will gain and spend agent cards to place their influence around the map, before cashing them in to complete operations, or leaving them in place trying to gain area control points and complete well-timed objectives. Through the first 2 rounds of play, players will try to feel out the potential agents they could recruit to their syndicates, such that for the 3rd and decisive round, they've curated an optimal hand of 6. As players fulfill operations and objectives, they will earn credits, and whoever has the most credits at the end of the game will be the winner. To set up, lay out the Shadow Moon board. Each player takes 16 matching influence. You'll usually stack these together when you play, but I'll be showing them lay flat for the overhead shots, and give each player the matching petty crime token flipped to the red and yellow side. All non-petty crime operation tokens are shuffled in the bag, and you'll seed the board with 5 of them. Any time you add an operation token throughout the game, flip it first to its grey side, place it on the border between the 2 sectors listed on that side, and then flip it over to its red side. The token should straddle the border between those 2 sectors. Shuffle up the red and yellow objective cards, and each player draws a hand of 3. Above the main board, there are 5 objective slots, 1 for each player. And so if you're playing with fewer than 5 players, draw 1 objective face up for each missing player. This, for example, would be the 4-player setup. The lower half of this card will list a sector which will be worth extra points for area control at the end of the game. And you should take one of these red frames and place it over that sector purely as a visual reminder. Set up the agent deck. The game has 10 factions, each of which has 10 agent cards plus a cover card which tells you that faction's name and information. In particular, the aggression and complexity that deck plays with. Choose or randomize a number of these factions equal to 2 more than the number of players. Return the cover cards to the box, leaving only the 10 agents, and shuffle them all together into a single deck. Now deal each player a starting hand of 6 agent cards. Deal 5 cards face up below the board, this is called the card row, and deal 1 card face up to the right of the board. The pile of cards located here is called the burned pile, and the card on top of that pile at any given time is called the burned card. Make supplies of the credits and the double-sided status tokens. The status tokens form part of the area control tactics and will be used on the board, and the credits serve as victory points. You'll be collecting them through the game, but you never spend them or use them for any purpose other than collecting. To finish setup, draw a number of operations tokens on their grey sides equal to the player count. Choose a first player. Then, in turn order, each player picks 1 token, seeds the board with 1 influence token in each of the 2 listed sectors, before returning it to the bag. You're now ready to play. Shadow Moon Syndicates plays over 3 rounds. After each of the first 2 rounds, there'll be intermediate scoring, and after the 3rd round, which follows slightly different rules to the first 2, there'll be endgame scoring. The game is fundamentally a tactical area control battle, and all of your points are going to come from 2 main sources. Those are from building up influence and cashing them in to claim operations tokens, and from building up influence to control sectors and hold them at the ends of rounds. You'll also gain credits from your objective cards, but these two score from combos with operations tokens and area control. Each round plays in turns, starting from the first player and going clockwise around the table, and during each round, each player will take 6 turns. You'll resolve your turn in these 4 steps. First is Hustle, where you may optionally use a claimed operation token for its action. Second is Deploy Agent. You'll play a card from your hand and resolve the actions printed above and, in certain circumstances, also below the line. Third is Fulfill Operation, where you can take an operation token off the board if you qualify for it. And last is Manipulate, letting you exchange a card from your hand with one from the card row or deck. Play then passes to the next player clockwise. So now let's look at each step in detail. The first step is Hustle, and this step is optional. If you have any operation tokens face up on their red sides, you may optionally exhaust one, flipping it over to resolve the action printed at the bottom of the tile in any sector on the board. Petty Crime, for example, has the most basic of the actions, add 1. So by exhausting this, I would take 1 influence, adding it to any sector of my choosing. The tokens feature a range of the game's standard actions, all of which will help you to get influence or cards where you want them. And I'll cover some of the specific actions later in the video. Wild tokens, which are generally much more beneficial from a scoring perspective, do not have any actions on them and thus cannot be hustled. You may hustle at most once per turn. The second step is Deploy Agent. This step is mandatory and it's the main part of the game. To do this, first choose any one card from your hand and play it face up onto the table. You may resolve all of the cards above the line actions in order from top to bottom. Then slide the card over to the top of your agent stack, and if you meet the criteria, you may resolve the below the line actions in order. You'll be able to do this if this is the first card in your agent stack, so in this case I could resolve that effect, or if the new card matches the faction of the card it's being placed atop. In this case, I will have resolved the above the line effect here, then moved it to my agent stack and resolved below the line. However, if the factions don't match, then you'll resolve the above the line effect, move the card to your agent stack, and do nothing more. You need to respect this sequence carefully because there are some effects in the game which target the cards in agent stacks. Beguile is an example of this. Resolving Beguile here above the line would allow you to target this card on top of your agent stack, while if you're resolving this one below the line, then it could be targeting itself. The other way to deploy an agent is to deploy it face down. You play the card face down onto the table, showing it to no one, resolve the basic action to add 1 influence to any sector as if it were an above the line action, and then move it to your agent stack and do nothing else. An agent stack with a face down card on top cannot be targeted by any effects which target agent stacks, and you always get to resolve the below the line effect when you move an agent onto a face down card. As for the hustle step, I'm not yet going to take you through what all of the various actions on the cards mean. I'll explain those a little bit later in the video. Suffice it to say that they're all ways of getting influence on the board in places you need them, or to manipulate the placement of agent cards. But what's important to know is that the cards are more restrictive on where you take your actions than the hustle actions. This hustle was to add an influence anywhere, while these cards are telling you exactly which sector to add to, or in some cases, adjacent to which sector. The third step is to optionally fulfill at most 1 operation token, and to understand this we need to understand area control. A player has area control over a sector by having strictly the most influence of any single player in that sector, as long as that number is at least 2. So as laid out here, green controls the works, blue controls the bazaar, blue controls Avante, because each has more influence than any single other player. Blue and purple are tied for 3 influence each in the spire, so nobody controls the spire. Pink controls neural network unopposed, 2-0, while neither Corsair nor Casino are controlled. Pink and green have the most influence, but they don't meet the prerequisite of 2. To fulfill an operation, you must control at least one of the 2 adjacent sectors. And in the sector you control, you must have at least as much influence as the number printed on the token. Right now, nobody can fulfill an operation. However, green would meet the requirements by adding another influence to the works. To fulfill the operation, spend all of your influence from the sector, returning it to your supply. Take the token and add it face up to your play area. You always spend all your influence from the sector, and if you overpay, here for example paying 6 to take a value 4 token, then also collect credits equal to the difference. At game's end, all operation tokens are worth credits equal to the number printed on them. So by gaining these excess credits, it means you will always gain 1 credit per influence spent on any operation. After fulfilling an operation, you always replace it from the bag, and you may only complete a single operation on each of your turns. The 4th and final step of your turn is manipulate, and this lets you optimize the cards in your hand. This step is optional. If you do it, you may either exchange 1 card from the card row with 1 card from your hand, or exchange with the deck, placing your old card on the bottom of the deck and drawing the top card to your hand. Play now passes to the next player clockwise. After 6 turns, nobody will have cards in hand anymore, and you'll proceed to the end of the round. In rounds 1 or 2, you'll go through the following steps. Firstly, the player with the most operation tokens, face up or face down, becomes the new first player. Where there's a tie, whoever was latest in the previous round's turn order breaks the tie. Next, score credits for control. Each player gets 1 credit per sector controlled, or 3 credits in the case of the spire. This follows the same rules outlined before. Most influence in a given area with a minimum of 2. Collect all of your credits to your area. Next, choose, reveal, resolve and discard 1 objective card from your hand. This has 2 halves and you resolve them both. For the top half, you gain 1 credit for each operation token you have which matches the type shown. Wilds count as anything and can count as a different type from round to round. Here I have 2 espionage including the wild, so I'd gain 2 credits. For the bottom half, you gain a bonus 3 credits if you currently control the printed area. You can also use these objectives to refresh your operation tokens, giving you access to their actions again for future rounds. For each half of your chosen objective card where you do not qualify for any credits, you may flip 1 operation token face back up. You can't voluntarily forego the credits you've earned to gain an operation token back. It's only if you qualify for 0 credits on a given half that you get to flip a token. Next, you'll bank agent cards, and this is an important part of preparing for round 3. In the most basic round, your agent stack will contain the 6 cards you played this round. But through various effects, it's possible that you have more or fewer, or that some of the cards aren't the ones you've played. Whatever the case, you now pick up your agent stack into your hand. If you have fewer than 6 cards, secretly draw until you have 6. Look at the cards and choose any 3 of them that you wish to bank. The 3 you take in round 1 and the 3 you take in round 2 will form your starting 6-card hand in round 3. Set the banked cards aside and then, without showing them to anyone else, return the remaining cards to the deck, as well as gathering up the card row, but not the burn pile. Shuffle the deck back together, and if it's now the start of round 2, then each player again draws 6 cards with a card row of 5, ready to start the round. At the start of round 3, players pick up their 6 banked cards to form their hand. You'll still reshuffle the deck, and it's still possible for players to play cards which let them draw cards from the deck during the 3rd round. However, you will not deal out a card row, and players do not get to manipulate on their turns at all during the round. Not with the card row, and not with the deck. Additionally, each player will by now have played 2 of their 3 objective cards. They do not hang on to the 3rd one. Instead, all of these leftover cards are played into the slots face up at the top of the board, alongside any which were placed during setup, meaning there will be 5 common objectives for the end of the game known to the players from the start of round 3. As we did during setup, place the red frames as quick visual indicators of which sectors players will be fighting for in this 3rd round. A sector which features twice scores double, and use the yellow side of the frame. Finally, all players may refresh 3 operation tokens ready for the final round. Keep this in mind as it lets you be a little more aggressive with spending them in the first 2 rounds. Once the 3rd round is complete, it's time for final scoring. You'll score control in the usual way, 1 point per sector or 3 for the spire, plus 3 for controlling an objective sector, or 6 if it's doubled. Players score for operations tokens as they match all 5 objective cards. So here the espionage scores 1, and each of these smugglings scores 2. Wilds only count as a single crime type, so here you'd call it smuggling and take 2. Finally, refresh all of your operation tokens and add their printed values to the credits you've collected. Here it's 20 plus 24 for a total of 44 credits. Player with the most credits wins. If tied, most influence in the spire breaks the tie, and if still tied, victory is shared. Now that we've taken you through the structure of the game, we'll go back and look at all of the standard actions which you'll find on the cards. So far, we've really only looked at the most basic action, which is add, letting you take an influence from your supply and place it in the appropriate sector. If you need to add and there are no influence in your supply, then take one from elsewhere on the board. The transfer action has no sector. This simply lets you move that many influence each across a border to an adjacent sector. Transferred influence can be yours or an opponent's. Push lets you transfer out of the listed sector. Pull lets you transfer into the listed sector. Ship lets you move influence from the listed sector, but you're not limited only to crossing a border. You can move it to anywhere. Eliminate specifically targets an opponent's influence and lets you remove that influence from the board, returning it to that player's supply. Here as well, you see a card which doesn't list a specific sector, rather it says where present, meaning any sector where you have at least 1 influence. Replace means to eliminate an opponent's influence and add one of your own in the same place. With redeploy, you remove the listed number of your own influence from the given sector, then add double that many influence across adjacent sectors. Then there's strengthen and usurp. To use strengthen, you must be in control of the sector, and it lets you add that many more influence to that controlled sector. For usurp, you cannot be in control. Pink could not usurp in neural network, for example. Usurping lets you add 1 and pull 1 to that sector. There are 2 effects related to the double-sided status tokens, which are displace and lockdown. The lockdown side has the interlinked chains, the displace side has the arrows. For either case, if there's already a status token of either type in the target sector, then your action is spent removing that status token and adding 1 to the sector. Otherwise, the action is to place the appropriate type of status token around your influence stack in that sector, and once again, add 1 influence. A token stack with lockdown is protected from all opposing players' effects. That is, no other player can target this influence with their action. While displace is present, any opposing player's influence which newly enters that sector, whether it be through adding or moving, is pushed to an adjacent sector by the owner of the displace token. Displace effects can chain to other displaces, but not endlessly. If displaced influence returns to a previous location, then it is not displaced again. If there's no longer any influence around a status token, for example, if I cashed in these influence, then the status is also removed. And all status tokens are removed from the board at the end of each round. There's also many effects which impact the cards in play. Suppose here we have the burn pile and the 4 players' agent stacks. The current burned card, that is the one on top of the burn pile, can be important as it combos with many actions. This effect, for example, is eliminate one in a sector of the burn card. And so you would look at the burn card, see the sectors present, choose one, and eliminate there. In this case, it's the maze or anywhere you're present. Other effects refer to all sectors of the burn card. Here, you'd eliminate one in all of these sectors, which is always up to a maximum of once each per sector. That means here I eliminate in the maze and in one sector where I'm present, which isn't the maze. The action burn allows you to take the top card from any one player's agent stack and burn it. The action interfere lets you draw that many cards from the deck to your hand, choose that many cards from your hand, and then place them face up onto any agent stacks. With Beguile, move the top card from one agent stack to the top of a different agent stack. With Sacrifice, draw the top card from the deck, add it to your hand, and then choose one card from your hand, burn it immediately, and add one to a sector on the new burn card. With Reanimate, add one to a sector on the burn card, and then draw the burn card, adding it to your hand before placing any one card from your hand on any agent stack. As you can see, all of these actions let you get cards where you need them or where your opponents don't want them. And once again, be reminded that if you choose to deploy your agent face down, that protects your agent stack from being interfered with by any other player's effects until after you've played your next face-up card to it, which has the added bonus of always getting to resolve the below-the-line effect. Some cards let you play another card, and there's a very specific order for doing this. If I played this card here, then I'd resolve above the line before it enters my agent stack as usual. So I'd add one casino, and then I would draw and immediately play the top card of the deck. That played card goes on top of the one I'm currently resolving, and I'd resolve above the line for that card. I then move these cards top to bottom to the agent stack and check whether I resolve below the line. So I'd move this one here, I don't match, so I don't get below the line, and then I'd move the first card played where I also now no longer match and therefore also don't get below the line. Finally, activating either above or below the line is always optional, but if you do choose to activate, then you must activate that whole section to its maximum extent. To play Shadow Moon Syndicates with 2 players, you must use a dummy third player called the Kingpin, which takes actions using the dice. Set up with 5 factions like a 3-player game, but begin with 3 common objectives face up like a 2-player count. The Kingpin uses an unused influence colour and starts with no influence on the board. In each of the first and second rounds, the Kingpin will take a total of 12 turns, one after each player turn. That means turn order will be first player, Kingpin, second player, Kingpin, and so on. When the Kingpin activates after your turn, you are the one who makes any decisions related to that turn. So where you have the opportunity, make sure you use the Kingpin to your advantage. To take a Kingpin turn, roll the die and take the card from the card row corresponding to that number, and then play it on the table, resolve only the above the line effect, then add it to the Kingpin's agent stack. Kingpin never resolves below the line effects, even when meeting a condition which would allow a player to do so. Kingpin's agent stack can be interfered with like any other players. Then replenish the card row from the top of the deck. If the die rolls up the bob symbol, then the card played is the one from the top of the deck. Kingpin must always resolve actions to their maximum possible extent, except that it will never add more than 5 influence to the same sector. If it ever runs out of influence, suppose we were adding 2 to the space docks, then first remove 1 influence from each sector with the equal lowest amount of Kingpin influence before resolving the action. When Kingpin takes any actions involving a player's hand, you bypass the hand step. For example, if an effect was normally to add a card to hand and then burn a card, you would simply burn the added card. Kingpin always completes an operation token if able to do so. It doesn't earn any credits, it just takes it off the board. And likewise, in round end scoring, you count Kingpin's influence when assessing control. When you reach the start of round 3, Kingpin no longer takes turns. Instead, simply gather up all 16 Kingpin coloured influence, place 3 into each sector with a red frame, 5 into any sector with a yellow frame, and all leftovers in the spire. Players can still take actions to eliminate or move this influence around. Take Kingpin influence into consideration when resolving the final area control, but once again, don't give Kingpin any credits. Whichever of the 2 human players has the highest score wins. And that's how to play Shadow Moon Syndicates. Do check out the project page for the game, we'll put a link to that in the description below.
Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, let me know and share this video if you enjoyed it, and have a great day. See you next time.